Hi, welcome back aboard the Earthmote. I'm Randall, and today we are continuing our dungeon design series where we look at different types of dungeons that you can use in your tabletop role-playing games. By understanding the different locations we have at our disposal, we can make informed choices about what challenges to present within our campaign settings or in your next adventure. Today I want to take a look at another fantasy dungeon staple, the mine.
And they call it a mine. A mine!
As we examine it, we'll see the premise of the mine is quite simple, but its simple purpose is not a weakness. We can make mines quite interesting and engaging by changing up a few different aspects of their design to make them a fresh challenge each time the party enters into one. So in this video, we hope to answer a few key questions. What is the purpose of the mine? When would we use a mine in our games? What is the general layout of a mine? What denizens would reside within, what traps are lying in wait, and what treasures can be found within. With all of that set, let's go ahead and get into it. Mines are created to extract natural resources from the earth. Usually this is valuable metal, gold, silver, copper, iron, and so on. Or it could be precious gems, things like diamonds, emeralds, etc. You could also have special fantastical resources too, things like mithril or adamantine. From its basic premise, the mine is actually one of the easier dungeons to create. You don't need a ton of depth to the background story for the dungeon. Someone found a precious resource in the area and they wanted to extract as much of it as possible from the ground. Thus, a mine was formed. That's really it. If you know how it originated and who built it, you are pretty much good to go with your mine dungeon. The who built it portion of it is something worth giving some consideration to, because we'll see that will inform some of the design choices for the mine's layout and structure. And we'll discuss more of that in a minute, but it is something worth considering. So with that understanding, when would we use a mine in our games? Well, despite its humble origins, there's actually a lot of really good adventuring hooks for heading out and exploring mines. You could have things like recovering a lost mine. Maybe the original inhabitants were driven out and now they want to get the mine back. Or maybe the party is tasked with protecting an active mine. Maybe the miners are under attack and they don't want to lose access to those natural resources, so they need the help of some mercenary adventuring parties. Or perhaps the party is searching for treasures. An old mine might be rumored to have some goods left behind, and the party might want to get their hands on it. Thus, they could head to a mine and adventure there. Defeating a lair. The mine could have become abandoned and then later become a lair for a monster or monsters, which are now causing troubles in the area. And the party is tasked with heading to the mine to clear it out and remove this troubling monster within the region. Passing through. Mines can be massive affairs. They can stretch for miles both horizontally and vertically, and they might have multiple entrances. Looking at the most famous fantasy mine of all, Moria, we see the Fellowship entered the mine in search of a way through the mountains to continue their journey on towards Mordor. Enriching a domain. If the party is entering into domain play, they might want to secure forms of wealth for their new fledgling territory. If there is a mine nearby, they might wish to claim it for their own domain, and so they need to adventure out and clear out anything that resides within it so they can claim that mine for themselves. As you can see, there are a lot of potential hooks, and I'm sure you can think of a lot more on top of those relatively basic and simple ones that would work out great for a mine. The nice thing about a mine's simplicity is the limited variety in rooms. While a tomb will have rooms with specific purposes designed within it, most rooms in a mine were areas where the miners followed the resource into and then dug it out. This means the dungeon layout will sprawl in all sorts of different directions. There will likely be lots of tunnels that connect to some smaller rooms where the ore was mined out. You can also make your tunnels bend and twist to add a bit of disorienting effect to the map. If you'd like, your mines are also going to feature multiple levels. The miners are going to chase the ore deeper underground if that's where it goes, and thus they're going to create multiple levels to the mine. But ultimately, it's up to you depending on how big you want the mine to be. If your mine does have multiple levels to it, you're going to want to have a central mine shaft. This is the area where goods and people are transported up or down the mine via some sort of elevator lift. You could have smaller lifts as well, but you're generally going to want to have one larger central one, and this is going to serve as kind of your central access to the dungeon. These lifts could be powered mechanically or magically, up to your preference. Generally, mining in Fantasyland is portrayed as being done with hand tools. This is pickaxes, hammers, chisels, etc. From a practical engineering standpoint, this means you're going to want to have a greater surface to area volume ratio because you could have more area being mined at a given time. Practically, this implies a lot of small mining areas separated by tunnels instead of a few large big rooms where the mining is being done. While this makes sense from a pure scientific and engineering standpoint, I think I'd still recommend mixing up your mining area sizes. This is going to help with the variety and potential challenges that a party could face within your mine. One of your largest cavern areas is going to be the entrance to your mine. This is where your ore or gems would be delivered for processing and ultimately shipment away from the mine for further refinement and use. In an active mine, this entrance is going to be a very busy place. The tunnels that lead away from this central beginning chamber are probably lined with track for ore carts. Moving large amounts of ore, rock, and or gems without mechanical or magical levers would be backbreaking work. So they're probably going to put something in place that helps improve the efficiency in moving that heavy material. The mine is also going to be supported by some sort of headquarters and living quarters for the miners. Mines are going to be located wherever the natural resource is. This means it could be pretty far away from the nearest town or village. Depending on the fantasy race of the miners, the living quarters could be found above ground or below it. And given the value a mine possesses to the owner, there's likely going to be some established defenses around the mine as well. This could be a walled palisade with a fortress attached to it, or a more basic military camp out front of the mine entrance. Whatever you think makes sense, there's probably going to be some sort of defense protecting this natural valuable resource. Also, a quick note on geography. Your mines are most likely to be found in hilly or mountainous regions on your campaign map. It's easier to dig into the side of a mountain or a hill rather than the ground of a valley. Let's talk a bit about how different fantasy races would build a mine and what would make them distinct from one another. Let's start with humans. The most obvious needs in a human mine are lighting and ventilation. Humans can't see in the dark, so there will be lots of lanterns or sconces on the wall that provide illumination for them to do their mining work. Additionally, human mines built in medieval periods were somewhat unstable. Mine collapses were common during that time period. So unless your world has significantly different engineering standards or technology levels for humans, a human mine could be a pretty dangerous affair. Turning our attention to elves, I think elven mines would be a bit rarer. Elves are more known for being in the woods, kind of that outdoors natural environment rather than going underground. However, that doesn't mean that elves wouldn't mine. Their mines would probably be built more sturdily than a human mine, decreasing the chance of cave-ins. But they would probably trade off production for the higher quality construction. It would take them longer to kind of build those stable supports as they expand their mines outward. And as a result, they have less time to collect and gather their ore or material that they're mining. Elves probably focus on mining gems or fantasy metals like mithril over other metals. If you really want to lean into those elvish tropes, Additionally, elves might utilize magic in their mining operations. We could see magical lifts for moving material, and spells like Move Earth, Transmute Rock to Mud, Stone Shape all have obvious practical applications for a mining operation. Following established lore, dwarves are going to be some of the best miners in your fantasy campaign. Dwarves are right at home underground and are natural miners. Dwarven mines should be easily identifiable. They're going to be clean, efficient, and well engineered. Cave-ins are going to be quite rare in dwarven mines. Dwarves are more likely to use mechanical designs for their mining operations over magical ones. You're going to see things like mining carts, mechanical lifts, and so on. But you could also implement some sort of runic magic if you'd like to lean into established dwarven tropes. That would be fine as well. Also consider that dwarven mines are going to have shorter tunnels than elven or human mines. Because the mine is designed with a pure utility aspect to it, there would be little reason for dwarves to extend their ceiling height to accommodate human-sized creatures. They're just trying to extract the material as efficiently as possible. Lastly, depending on the version of the game that you're playing, it's possible that fantasy races with dark vision might not have many light sources in their mines. They might be able to mine totally fine in the dark via their dark vision and have very little need for light. Obviously, humans are going to need light, and then depending on the specific rules and details of your game, that dark vision might or might not be totally sufficient for doing that mining operation. The thing I like about mines is that they can be home to a diverse set of monsters. I think the most obvious delineation you need to make and understand is whether the mine is currently active or is it abandoned. An active mine is going to be occupied by the miners, whether that's humans or demi-humans. You might also have a few guardian beasts that assist in protecting the mine. An active mine can also face threats. You can lean into that dug too deep trope in fantasy. Maybe the miners cracked into the Underdark and now certain monsters are flowing up and they need to repel them. Or perhaps they ran into another subterranean race, maybe the Drow or the Dwargar, which take offense to these overlander miners coming into their area. Of course, you could also use the ancient evil sealed away, a Baelor, a Lich, whatever you'd like. On the flip side, if your mine is abandoned, I think you have even more options. Looking at the threats an active mine could face, any of those creatures or fantasy races could have driven out the miners and now occupy the mine for themselves. Alternatively, you could have a second party move into the mine after it's abandoned. Maybe brigands are using it as a base of operation, or maybe some goblins or orcs have moved into it as their subterranean home. A good example of this would be in The Lord of the Rings. We see that the goblins overran Moria and now live there. You could have beasts that move into the mine. It could be simple beasts like a mountain cat, or it could be magical like a displacer beast. There's really no limit here, as a lot of different creatures would look to a mine to use it as shelter and kind of a defensible position. Additionally, you might see tunneling creatures co-adopt mines for their own purposes or lairs. Umber hulks or bullets, things that like to burrow, could utilize the mine's already built tunnels and add to them via their own natural tunneling abilities. That could be a really interesting setup as the players come into this man-made mine only to find areas that look like they've been dug out by a creature. Then they realize that something might be going on here more than just a human-based mine. You could also employ elementals in the mine. Zorns really like to find mineral-rich terrain because they enjoy eating precious gems, gold, silver, whatever they can get their hands on. So it would make sense for Zorns to find mines and be occupied. Mines could also be a good environment for floating creatures like a beholder. Beholders can easily navigate narrow tunnels and they could float up or down the different mine shafts with ease. It would be a natural environment for them to move through and defend with relative ease because of their maneuverability within these kind of winding mine corridors. The monster diversity of your mine environment is really just going to be restricted by the background you conceive for that mine. There's really a lot of great options to employ in a mine and a lot of different ways you could take the design of your mine. And of course, you're going to have chances to mix and change that up in the future if you build a different mine. So, go ahead and play with it. I don't think there's really a wrong answer here. So hopefully that kind of helps explain what the basic monsters you might see in a mine would be. But of course, you can mix that up, subvert expectations, and find reasons why other ones might be there as well. There are a couple of ways to integrate traps seamlessly into your mines. First, we have natural hazards, which are a trap in a sense. The most obvious trap here would be the cave-in, but you could also have other things like toxic gases or thin floors. These types of traps would be triggered when the party is interacting with certain elements of the dungeon, or it could be sort of a dynamic element in a combat. Maybe they get caught with a rampaging monster and its erratic attacks are hitting support beams that might cause a cave-in. For established traps, you're likely to see two types of protection traps in a mine. Traps that protect natural resources and traps that protect the mine in general. Traps protecting the natural resources are going to be set up by the miners to keep their valuables secure. These types of traps could be placed in storage areas or perhaps excavation areas where new valuable veins of the ore have been recently discovered but not yet mined. Traps protecting the mine in general would be placed in areas that are vulnerable to infiltration, but not highly trafficked by the miners. For example, dwarves could put traps in areas that border the Underdark. In an active mine, traps are going to be selectively placed. Mines are a busy place with lots of characters moving throughout the space quite frequently. It just doesn't make sense to put up traps that could be accidentally triggered by your own mining populace. In an abandoned mine, traps could be more plentiful. If the owner shuttered the mine for a reason with an intent to return at a later date, it would make sense for them to set up some significant defenses to protect their asset. On the other hand, if the original owners were driven out abruptly, they might not have had any time to set up any traps, and as a result, there would be very few traps in the mine. Most traps set in a mine are probably going to be mechanical in nature. Arrow traps, spear traps, nets, alarm systems, crushing boulders, and so on. You could see magical traps in an elven mine, or a mine that has a wizard owner, or possibly a mine that hired a wizard to lay different enchantments or wards. However, hiring a wizard to do that would probably be quite expensive, so it would have to be a very valuable mine in order for that to be worth it. I think the treasure prospects in a mine are somewhat limited in their diversity. The most common treasure the party will find is the unrefined resource the mine is known for. It's possible the party could find some left behind in an abandoned mine. If it's an active mine, the party has a chance to get their hands on the resources that have yet to be shipped away for further refinement. An active mine is also probably going to have some coin on hand to pay its workers, pay for goods and services that are being delivered to the mine. So there's some kind of diverse treasure there. It's also possible that the mine is connected to additional structures like a fortress, or maybe the miners dig into an unexpected space like an old temple or something like that. Under these situations, you could introduce treasures that make sense for those areas. Of course, this is kind of stretching the idea beyond our basic premise of the mine that we're explaining, but your game is going to have a lot of these hybrid dungeons where it's a mine attached to a temple or whatever. So I think it's worth mentioning and calling out that this is the mine portion, but it could be connected to other areas that have different treasures. Treasure and rewards also come with the missions or work tied to the mine as an adventure location. We mentioned a non-exhaustive list of when you would use a mine dungeon in your game. A lot of those have natural adventure hooks baked into them, and most of those could be offered by patrons for a treasure reward to the party. And lastly, but certainly not least, the most valuable treasure a mine can offer is the mine itself. If you are playing more of a domain management game, the party has direct economic reasons for taking control of the mine. Even if you aren't playing a domain style game, the party could be hired by someone who is a noble or a merchant's guild that wants the mine to expand their power and influence within the region. The mine is a classic dungeon type. They are worth examining and understanding so we can use them effectively in our games. Given the nature of D&D style games, these are often focused on treasure, gold coins, fabulous gems, and so on. Well, those precious resources need to come from somewhere, notably mines. So your world probably needs to have mines in it, unless you have some sort of fantastical reason for how the gold coins showed up in your world. Mines are really versatile, and the status of the mine is going to change a lot about the contents of the dungeon and the party's purpose for being there. Abandoned mines are generally obstacles. There's something to be overcome. The party can deal with whatever obstacles have taken over the abandoned mine, then they're likely to achieve their goal, their mission for being there, whatever that is. Active mines are resources to be protected or conquered. The economic value of an active mine is great, and it will serve as a really nice source of conflict in your sandbox if you position it correctly and choose for it to be so. That's what I think about mines. Let me know if you think I missed any integral parts about a mine that should be discussed. Let me know what types of dungeons you would like to see in the series next. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and consider subscribing to the channel. Check out Enchanted Nimbus, my monthly newsletter. Thanks for hopping aboard the Earthmote. I'll see you in the next one.